Hello, welcome to the party. Uh, I am Greyworks. I'm the creator of Howling Hoods, and today I am joined by the banished Fire Prince of the Fire Nation, Art Handle. How you doing, man?
Is that what we're going with?
Yeah,
Okay,
something like that.
that's fine. Hi everyone, I'm Art Handle. I'm a small Twitter artist, animator. I just kind of keep to my own corner of the internet, but I've been doing a few videos here and there. Nothing,
Yeah.
just it's a small art creator. Nothing
Mhm.
much.
Mhm. Yeah, and today we are talking about a series retrospective of Korra, uh, Legend of Korra. I was about to call it Last Airbender, just because I've been on a bit of a binge as of late.
Yeah, I've been to the series every 2 years. I go on a Last Airbender binge, so I understand that.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, well, actually, it's because it kind of started because my friend uh, of macabre storytelling recently had a big video of
Ooh.
Avatar in general because it was the first time of him watching the series, but it was because he originally like put up a poll of like what should I watch because he came across there was an argument on Twitter of like uh, the technology in Korra and kind of like how technology progressed, and but then it kind of progressed into the argument progressed into like guys being really mad about Korra because she's a girl. But so yeah, it was a really cool series to see him go into after like shockingly it's just like kind of like seeing like what a man in his like 30s kind of thinks of Korra. Oh,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah. Yeah, he's just really he hasn't gone into core yet. He's just an avatar. So yeah, but while we're on the subject, Korra itself, I remember when the show was first announced. Of like it was first announced on like a Nickelodeon site or like on a
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
yeah, and it was like
It came because I think I would have been I think it would have come out around the time I was like in entering high school, I
mm,
guess.
mm-hmm,
Entering high school, leaving middle school, around there.
yeah,
So I'd already we'd already by that point I think we'd already grown up on
mm-hmm,
Last Airbender, and we were like ready to like consume something a bit
yeah.
more.
Well, it was also that was the kind of the advertisement of Korra itself was that it was a darker, more adult series that was going to like go into more political territory, and it even like had like a time jump because of with a more steampunk like aesthetic. I remember the first clip was shown was like in episode one, it was Core like on the run from like the metal bending police, and yeah, it looked super cool, and but then like after years and years of watching it, it kind of became Nickelodeon's a
It
very
got yeah,
divisive series among the fans.
yeah.
Yeah, some people think it ruined the show completely. Some people like the whole franchise. Some people really love it. Some people just love aspects of it, but can't get into certain parts of it. I think I'm kind of in the middle when
Yeah,
it comes to
agreed.
Korra. Korra, both the character and the show, I think is a lot more interesting to talk about than Avatar. It's almost because like almost everything in Avatar is just like all the good parts and like all the good stuff to
Well,
prove.
yeah, you've exhausted the discussion,
Oh
right? And that's really what it is. Which, like, I think, of course, like that's kind of the territory. I think controversial art is more fun to discuss, and I think the way they went about inviting that controversy is where like a lot of people um, have take issue with. And everyone knows all the big things that draw people's ire. The
yeah.
whole Unavatu thing,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the rush seasons.
hmm But also, maybe the most divisive, well, other than season two, would be Korra herself as a character. And, well, quite frankly, I love Korra as a character,
Yeah,
but like I get why people have a hard time liking her because she is kind of really hard to like by the show's own like aberration of like because she's like like especially in the first two seasons she does come off very like purposely she is designed to be kind of the opposite of Aang.
yeah,
Uh, the way she comes off so headstrong and like first into problems, but also like so aggressive, almost doesn't make her come off as headstrong. Like it almost makes her come off like a jerk
yeah.
a lot of ways. But uh, I think the show manages to make it work because like in the first like like her she does have more motive and like to a degree of personality than Aang, but it's almost by design. As the Avatar was more about stopping the Fire Lord. It had a 3 art like season plot. Of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
more flexible. Uh,
Yeah, because yeah, I think they've talked about this one. The big issue with Korra was that like they didn't have that like pre-planned stuff. Like you can I don't have it on me right now, but I think if you scour some image boards, you'll be able to find the original pitch Bible for the Last Airbender, and it was very clearly from the beginning when they made Last Airbender conceived as a 3 season show. There's some really weird stuff in it. Like Azula was once Prince Azul, and Ira was actually just like intentionally teaching Zuko bad techniques to gimp his skills or whatever. It's like a lot, lots of they wanted to do like a Toph love triangle. It's very strange. Well, back when Toph was conceived as a
oh
guy,
yeah, yeah,
very strange stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just kind of how that stuff goes.
yeah. After that, like how it kind of just it took off the ground so well that like then they were able to get when they pitched Korra, it was originally like Nickelodeon was very much like at first it was like you get 1 season.
Yeah, yeah. See, that's really the whole thing. The big issue with Korra, more than anything, Korra's real issue isn't. It was it kind of like Korra's big issues is that it got like all these like weird things. It inherited all these weird things, right? Because everyone like blames Korra for technological advances, but here's the thing, right? If you watch The Last Airbender, the big thing in that series is that like the Fire Nation has already undergone an industrial revolution.
Yeah,
By the time of Last Airbender, they've discovered air travel, railroads, drilling, factory
they
making,
have
you
Steam.
know, yes, steam power. The problem is the genie is out of the bottle. You can't go back there.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's one thing for Korra. And secondly, there's also the fact that like it was again conceived as 1 season. Later on, they just kind of had to like, well, it was 1 season, and then we get another season. We don't know if we get anything after that. And then they knew that they were going to be able to do 3 and 4, which is
Mhm.
why 3 and 4 are like really good
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they can plan long term for the arc.
yeah, yeah. 3 also it does have the benefit of also like I know like of I think it kind of does the one thing that Avatar did of like it introduces its villain first, like in season 3 with
Mhm.
Korra. Granted, it's kind of it's almost comical how like evil she's presented, like when she's first like call me Korra, and there's like I think there's like a violin, like woo!
Like it's like yeah, like yeah. I mean, I said I have said that like I think this is one point I've made as I think they just should have started with 3. 3 I think is a really
Mm,
great way to
yeah,
start the series, right? Like begin the series with the collapse of the Earth Kingdom, right? So there's a continuity, like right at, like where when the series ends is the Great Peace. The series like when the Last Airbender ends, there's this great movement of peace. Why not start the beginning of the series inverted?
yeah,
Like instead, the series starts with the collapse of the Earth Kingdom, and the series is just sort of like dealing with everything that entails.
yeah,
Like maybe the last, maybe TLDR.
yeah.
Oh,
It
that's
kind of touches on an advantage Avatar had from the get go when it came as opposed to Korra because Avatar, it starts with like there's a status quo, but the status quo was very much like invading nation, all that stuff. It's like it's in the middle of 100-year war. But Korra, what it does have its status quo, but like throughout most of Korra, the like especially season one, it's like the mission is to kind of maintain the status quo. Uh,
Well, which is also really fun too. Like there is a great video by a YouTuber by the name of So Uncivilized. I'll link you to it later. But he sort of makes a piece on why one of the reasons why Empire Strikes Back was such a brilliant movie, and it's because it engages in a Helgian dialect. There's sort of a thesis and antithesis,
mhm,
and
mhm.
it's a way what a director will do is they'll introduce an idea and then they'll like invert their idea to keep things familiar while also like expanding the visual and the visual language of the series that they're constructing. So
Yeah.
like in the beginning of like, and that's like the entirety of Empire Strikes Back, but it also kind of like, for instance, in Empire Strikes Back, the end of the movie was the big battle, but in the beginning of Empire, it's the big battle. And
Mhm.
instead of the heroes winning, it's the heroes being forced to run away.
Yeah, yeah, they're on the run.
Then you have like, and then this all culminates to the end of the film where it's like, oh, I want to be this great Jedi like my father. Turns out your dad's an asshole,
Yeah.
and this is how they do it. Korra did something rather brilliant, and especially with season three, which is why I think they should have started with season three.
Mhm.
I think the idea of a new, young, seasoned Avatar ready to face the world would have been much better.
Mhm.
And instead it's not the merry band of heroes against the big empire. It's peacekeepers trying to stop a global terrorist cell from undoing world order.
Yeah. Core does do something very smart though, of like it knows most of its audience there were people who watched Avatar, so they don't really need to go through the whole training session. Like when Core's introduced, she's 16 years old, a physical prodigy as a bender. And so like we don't need all that time of like her being like, well, I need to know how to do fire bending, I need to know how to do water bending, and like much like older than Aang. So like she's already like, well, when they both start in the series, she's more ahead of him physically wise, but it's like
Mhm.
she hits that wall of spirit. I like that a lot in Korra too. Is like the avatars like element they struggle with the most isn't like just the one they were opposite with. Like it's not just like fire struggles with water. It's more of a personality thing, as like spiritually thing. As Korra, like
Yeah.
yeah, she's amazing with fire. uh, but yeah, she knows what she wants, and like she knows what she wants to be. Like even as a toddler, she was like, "I'm the Avatar. You gotta deal with it." And she
Yeah.
comes in, but then like it's almost like season one almost has moments of like deconstructing her idea of what an avatar is like,
Hmm.
especially with Amon, who's a much better like anti-avatar than like season two's anti-avatar.
Yeah, no, no, straight up. Yeah, no, I wrote this before. Like again, back to that thesis, antithesis, which I think it happens throughout all of Korra. Which, by the way, I think Korra is great, and I
Oh
think, yeah, and for the most part, I think like my overall thoughts are I think Korra mostly succeeds in what it wants to do, but I think its big problem is that it kind of gets greedy and overreaches
hmm
in some thematic areas, and without really thinking about like overarching consequences, can kind of like undermines a lot of the series' core themes, which I can get to later. But yeah, Korra is fun because she's an inversion of Aang. Like
uh-huh.
right off the bat, she's not even the same sex as Aang. She's a female. She's a
Yeah.
woman, and as a woman, she's going to be facing a world that has a different like outlook towards that gender.
Mhm.
There's a bit of a battle of the sexes going on
Yeah, yeah,
between Korra
yeah.
and Aang. Uh, then on top of that, you have the fact that they're in different age groups.
Mhm.
One is happening. Korra is Aang is at the edge of his childhood and entering adolescence, and Korra is at the edge of adulthood. So there is sort of a difference in like the kinds of conflicts that you're going to get. Last Airbender is very much presented as a morality play, whereas Korra is more of like, getting ready to face the world. There's also
Mhm.
the fact that they're from two different backgrounds. Aang was a monk, so that was one of the most important aspects of his character, because Aang was a monk. He was trained in the ways of non-violence. He wasn't meant to fight people, and so that shows about how this, you know, they took the most non-violent element that's focused on evasion and quick thinking, and they gave him more powers as the series went on, and those powers were more direct, and they forced him to confront his problems. Korra's kind of the opposite. She knows all the physical stuff. It's
Yeah.
learning the spirituality. One of the small details I like is how, when the series starts, she can't use air, and when the series ends, she's using it like her second nature. She's not even using the wingsuits. She's
Mm.
using air glider to travel everywhere, which kind of just, I don't know. I mean, why they kind of just turn Naga into kind of a useless character.
Yeah, they're like, ah, well, Aang had a pet, so let's give Korra a pet. But it's like, even Momo has more stuff than Pavu.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. I mean, you like Last Airbender is a series with this monk, who are you, a part of a religious practice, a
mhm.
member of a religious practice, which is centered around the idea of detaching yourself from the world, learning to assume the responsibility of, God, learning to be responsible for the world, realizing he is the spirit of the world and he has to, oversee it. And Korra is about a demigod who needs to learn what it's like to be humble, who needs to know what it's like to be human, and all that jazz. I think there's a really fun, back and forth between these two
It's
series, and there's a great dialogue happening.
yeah, it's also interesting from like a point of view of like Aang has a lot more traits that we would associate with like traditionally feminine, while Korra has a lot more like upfront, like almost traditionally masculine traits. Like
Yeah,
even to
it's
their
it's really cool.
builds.
It's really cool
Yeah.
because, yeah. They even I love that they draw attention to that in the original series. Like, I'm not a girl. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also like yeah, 11-year-olds are not going to be to the degree that's like yeah, there's not too much of a difference between them. Like it's before he's really a man at any point, which is like
Yeah.
why the stakes are so high in that. Korra season one stakes are definitely a bit lower for the most part.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, and it is fun. Well, depending on who you ask, but like see, Korra gets well, Aang does get time to be a kid. There's always like this overshadowing threat of like Sozin's Comet or the Fire Lord or like anywhere we're not doing something, there could be a village being burned down by the Fire Nation. In Korra, there's a bit more lax time for the most part, so we do get some episodes where Korra can just like breathe and yeah, experience like romance a bit more genuinely. Uh, but yeah, I love that when we first like when Korra first leaves the Southern Water Tribe under the White Lotus, like uh after like she's almost expecting like like an Ains adventure, but then she comes
Yeah.
into this whole new like Republic city and stuff like that. And there's like metal bending police, and it's not just new to Korra, it's new to like the audience as well because they know all the stuff about Avatar, but it's like now they have to deal with like buses and cars and like uh a city built like
Yeah, it is really. Yeah, I love the world of Republic City.
mhm.
I think it's a really fantastic addition to Korra. Mostly because I think it's a really good look at like, and this is like a really good theme in Korra overall. How Korra explores like post-colonial legacies,
Yeah.
because the whole thing with Korra is it is like, like Last Airbender, of course, is like, yeah, it's like a story, good versus evil, but it's also like a retelling of like 20th century Asian history.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
the Last Airbender was about, Japanese colonialism and how they basically, Japanese conquest
Mhm.
and, fascism and how that takes over things. Korra is interesting, and it sort of more directly deals with like the aftermath, like what happens, what happens, afterwards, like what happens with all this stuff afterwards. So, like for instance, like, Republic, like what is the United Republics? The United
Shanghai.
Republics are people. Yeah, well, yeah, like it's basically people. All these were the first colonies the Fire Nation ever made, but because they had owned them for 100 years, due to like cultural friction and caste, the caste system of Fire Nation people on top and Earth Nation on top on the bottom, they eventually intermingled and they were able to make unique new identities. And then, of course, refugees from across the world came, so on and so forth. What we're seeing is this cultural medley, something that's, a nation that's not any one nation. And this is, of course, true for, this is like the history of, very true for the history of our contemporary world. When the Second World War happened, in Japan and Germany gobbled up a bunch of territories that used to belong to all these other countries. After the war ended, the first thing a lot of these countries did was like, "Hey, can I get my old country back that we used to own?" The French immediately went back to the French Indochina, and they realized, "Oh wait, no, we don't want to be French citizens anymore." And the Dutch came back to the Indies and like, "No, we don't want to be the Indies anymore. In fact, we're going to make our new identities. We've come to identify, as our own unique identities," and thus kicked off a series of. I mean, that is what a lot of like the 1900s is, a series of nations declaring independence from imperial powers and creating their own identities. And that's a big theme of Korra, exploring the unique industrial age, the ideologies that came from the industrial revolution, as a result of the industrial revolution, from fascism to communism to authoritarianism, independence, all that stuff. It's really fun to see how an industrial society, has an impact. Right.
And some people have been like, of kind of the almost commodification of like stuff like bending, like more advanced forms of bending, like lightning bending. But I do kind of take it as like, for what it wasn't like it was more an advanced art, but the way it kind of gets
I
commodified.
think that was a really cool idea. I think the
Yeah.
idea of effectively, like as society progresses, one of the things that really we are much smarter than the people from like 200, even like even the C student in your high school is probably smarter than like a lot of the great thinkers of yesteryear, if only because, or at least has the potential to, if only because he has so much knowledge at his fingertips. One of the advantages of industrialization and advancement is that knowledge becomes more democratized.
Yeah.
And
And
becomes
if like,
more available.
yeah, if there's a skill set that also becomes like especially useful, like lightning bending, being able to power, a whole factory for like half a day, like guess what's going to be top level with the firebenders?
I mean, yeah, like it is sort of like make you wonder, like, well, does that like affect like how does that work like, economically? Like, yeah, I wonder, like, do bending sub skills make money? Like,
Yeah.
that'd be like a really interesting thing to like explore. I think Korra does some, at least they play around with it. I love the idea of, it is fun to see how these new arts are changing the world. Electricity has become more democratized, not just rooted in the Fire Nation people. The Fire. It's funny how like both the Fire Nation royal family, thanks to Zuko and Toph, democratized two new bending forms. But it's also interesting that even some bending forms are now considered illegal. Like I don't know how they figured out blood bending.
No, yeah, especially like
did you teach someone and did they teach someone
she
else?
had to because
Yeah.
what's his name?
Yakone.
Yeah,
Mr.
Cohen. Yeah, he references
Psychic
the art.
bloodbender. Which I still think is a really cool idea. The fact that they even made a character like that was so interesting.
Yeah, I like seeing the kind of the early 19th century like crime aspects of Republic City. With like when he tries to get away, he has to get away on like one of those weird ostrich horses that they have.
Yeah, I know. It is funny. Like, yeah, he gets in like a rickshaw that has like an ostrich horse, which is like that's great. Yeah, like the architectural style is also really fun too. One like thing I really love is the architectural style of Republic City. You can see lots of. I mean, you can even see right here the sort of tops with the picture here. You can see the sort of the tops are very like Japanese and Chinese inspired. The art style, I believe, is Japanese Western eclectic. It takes a lot to, which is little bits and pieces of Taisho era Japan Like a lot of Republic City and a lot of the architecture of the show comes from Taisho era
Mhm.
in Taisho and Showa era Japan, which again were the dawn of industrialization for those two societies. So I think
Oh,
it's the way the series sort of uses intertext and draws from history and historical analogs to communicate things have changed. It's the dawn of a new era.
and what's
I
really
mean, look at
interesting
that
about even like,
skyscraper. Look at how it is. How it is.
yeah. Well, I was just gonna say without
Yeah,
even like vocally communicating it, it kind of does it with the kind of the first two people Korra runs into of like what's Republic City is meant to represent. It's Mako and Bolin of
yeah,
like they're the son of a earthbending father and a firebending mother, and
yeah.
it's like yeah, this is like they are technically like a mixed family, but you wouldn't really know that Mako
Yeah,
has more like Fire Nation s traits, like red eyes and like sharper hair, and like he's a bit leaner and taller than Mako.
you can definitely see that there is very much like you can see like ethnic character
Yeah,
within. I think that's really cool. I do
that's
love.
something nice in Korra. You got more variety of skin tones with.
Yeah. Let's see. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool. The idea of them being two children of immigrants,
Mhm.
I really enjoyed. I really like the idea of
It does
Mako.
kind of dance over the fact that they were homeless. A
Mako and
little.
Bolin are just really. Mako and Bolin are very tricky characters. They're kind of like. I think people talk about they're kind of redundant. Mako doesn't really add much outside of being a pretty face and the source of a lot of romantic sexual tension.
Yeah.
And he just kind of has like a bunch of arcs that are like this nebulous Korra, I have to discover my identity. And it's like, what the fuck's your identity, dude? I don't know. Maybe I'll figure it out after I become a detective. I LARP as a detective for a bit. And then Bolin is just kind of there. But Bolin's really interesting because he doesn't really have like a theme. It's more like
No, he's there for a lot of like comic relief, but he's like it's interesting like how unlike Sokka, he's a pretty competent fighter in his own right for the most
mm,
part.
I I have likened Bolin to there is sort of a theme with Bolin, which is this sort of theme of the diamond in the rough.
Mhm.
That within these industrial societies, there are people with unique potential, that are brimming with potential and talent. To me, you could make an argument and like squint and think, well, Bolin might embody the archetype of someone like a Charlie Chaplin or Raj Kapoor,
Mhm.
sort of like these great the early industrial era actors and performers who were able to entertain people, who were extremely charismatic, who were able to connect with people. Ergo the diamond in the rough. It also makes sense in terms of like the kinds of characters they would be. Again, Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton were like comedians, so they'd all do a lot of like vaudevillian slapstick. And same thing with like Raj Kapoor. The Raj Kapoor was a much more sophisticated uh, South Asian. He was the Charlie Chaplin of India, but he was a lot more sophisticated, I guess. But what I'm trying to say again is that there was sort of like there was a vaudevillian aspect I really enjoyed to Bolin.
You could
Uh,
also like make a comparison between like Bolin and almost like Jackie Chan, but more like of Jackie Chan's more physical comedy of like
yes,
yeah,
yes,
like
like
a goofy guy, but definitely like he's like at the end of the day, like a very competent in like a one-on-one match, and he has one of the like rarest sub skills of a bender of lava bending.
yeah, I always thought that was interesting. I thought that was like, well, maybe it's because of it. I've always theorized it was because of his like his heritage of being a child
Half,
of an
yeah.
immigrant. I think the idea of him being the product of two cultures is why he's able to pull that off.
After it does also do something. It was something that got pointed out to me of Kaya Tenzin's sister, the waterbender. Her waterbending is actually a lot more similar to her father's airbending than it is to Katara's. Like that's
Ooh.
really like she does really sharp spirals and like a lot of more fluid, like quick movements than like your average waterbender.
I always thought one of my I have a lot anytime you see a series, there's always like, oh, I have my own ideas of what I would like to add, what I would like to throw my hat in the ring. One thing I've always said that would have probably been a really good idea for a series is don't even call the series Legend of Korra. Call it The Son of the Last Airbender. Put the
Mm.
focus on Tenzin in his early 30s, and he discovers the new avatar, and it's him and this new kid trying to navigate this new world. Start the series off with the new airbenders popping up and all that stuff. I think that would have been a
Yeah.
different framing device. It also makes sense because there's a better continuity too, because you also have Aang's kids, who I thought were fantastic additions. It's
Mm,
interesting to see that Aang was it's fun to see some of the flaws Aang had. It's not necessarily flaws; it's more limitations. Aang,
mhm.
he did the best he could, but the best he could ultimately had to sacrifice intimacy with his family.
Yeah, it's not even like that he was a bad dad. It was more like he was trying to do something that was bigger than like
His
he probably
children,
couldn't do on
and
his
of course,
own.
yeah, I also love the line that I forget this, not Pema, the sister of Tenzin,
Oh, Kaya.
Kaya. There's a line she says that I really love. It's like, we could have helped you. You didn't have to do
Yeah.
preserve airbending culture all on your own. We were always there.
Mhm.
I really love one of the best moments in the entire series is that little dialogue that Boomy has with
Aang statue.
with the statue. I still think, yeah, I think it's amazing.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's great because you can tell, it's really interesting because it's like you have the one like non-airbender in the family who was very deep in security, and yet like still ended up becoming a great warrior in his own right. um the problem is that, but like he wanted to do the best with someone he very clearly loved. So it is interesting to see how even bending. Yeah, and then of course I think that the way the series engages, this was a big problem with the first series, and I'm glad that the comics and even Korra addressed this. The way the series engages non-benders, I think, is much better. Like,
Mm,
really considering, like, well, if some people have an ability, how will they use that? And we clearly see that there, in Republic City, that benders and organized crime can monopolize violence and use it to threaten people they don't like, threaten and intimidate people they don't like.
yeah.
And even people from different bending disciplines are willing to put aside their differences. Like the triple threat triad are three different, groups that were historically enemies that are like, what, let's put aside our differences and like mug this non-bender. It's also interesting to see the continuation of things like prejudice. Hiroshi Sato, I think, is really interesting. He's like what, like 50 something years old, so he would have been old enough to see the he might have not been old enough to witness the 100-Year War, but he might have been old enough to
Because they're in
see,
the aftermath.
yeah, the aftermath, the immediate aftermath, and the destruction left behind. So maybe he tried to unlearn prejudices, and then when his wife, the love of his life, was cut down by a firebender, the same group of people that plunged the world into all this mess, that doesn't that just validate his anger?
Hmm.
It's stuff like
Yeah.
that. I think that's like I think that, and this is why I'm saying this is why one of the reasons I like Korra. I think Korra is much more courageous in that it tries to engage with some
Right.
of the ideas.
Yeah. A reason why like Avatar was also itself was able to get away with a lot of the stuff is that it did have. I love Avatar, but it does have a very simple take on a lot of politics. Korra
Mhm.
goes out there like a bit more, and you could totally say with like what the message they try to put out. Like you could totally say like matter of execution wasn't that great, but it's like I respect like all the shots that they take and like get into like a lot of darker stuff, or especially like in like season 4 when Prince Ru shows up and like I'm not sure if it's the president or Tencent that says he's just like a figurehead. We're gonna have a bunch of ministers just
He
doing
just kind
the
of, yeah, admits that he's not going to do anything.
yeah. It's like you shit, he's a puppet head. Like that's not
They
something
kind
you're
of
gonna
openly
expect to
admit that,
hear
like,
from a
which is kind of a revealing confession, you
yeah.
know. But yeah, and of course, like, the implications that are kind of weird. It's like, well, if they're going to put puppets in them, like, isn't that going to get us back in the same situation
Mhm.
that caused the death, the first,
Yeah.
that
Earth
caused the problems with King Quaesrian,
Yeah, it's
King
interesting
Quaesrian.
also as well when you consider the Earth Kingdom of like it had less actual bending monarchs because
Yeah,
as far as we know, the Earth King wasn't a bender. Near was the Queen or the or Wu, definitely not, but like everyone, the Fire Nation, all the fire bending kids, all of like the Fire Nation royalty, everyone there was historically a bender, save for like the people who were married into it, and they had like the best
Mm,
training. Waterbending like chiefs, like that was very important to them, and from what we've seen, even like the ones who aren't like the waterbenders, they're either married towards waterbenders or warriors in their own right, like
yeah.
Sokka's dad, and like
Mm.
and Air Nomads, while they didn't have like a unity, they didn't have a leader. They did
No,
have like
don't you remember the how Fire Lord Sozin took on the air bending army?
oh yeah yeah, but yeah, the Airbenders just they had a community, but they were like higher up monks, and all of them were kind of like spiritual
Yeah,
leaders.
apparently there was no such thing as a non-bending airbender. So that's kind
Yeah.
of an interesting tidbit. But yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
I agree. Yeah, it's really interesting to look at how bending affects the world. One of the things I really like with Korra is um, this is just sort of a small thing I really like, but I always like that, like, if you look back at the history of like revolutions, and revolutionary movements, the vast majority of them are usually organized as an alliance between a society's elite and aristocracy, as well as the common folk. A lot of revolutions are not really meant to, aren't really this. There's a lot of like, we're gonna use, like revolution. A lot of like faux revolutionary rhetoric is about, we're gonna make this great change and upend society. When a lot of revolutions are just like about just replacing existing power structures.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, there are a good amount of revolutions that are genuinely well-meaning. Like,
Yeah.
okay, you look at, I mean, if you look at every single like revolution in history, behind them aren't just farmers and tradesmiths, but many of the heads of these revolutionaries are doctors and lawyers and
Mhm.
scientists. There's a reason why fascists always target a society's educated people. There's a reason why, you know, places of learning are always targeted, because that's where revolutionaries are born. You look at guys like Che Guevara. He was a physician by trade. Before he was gun running, before he was a gun running guy, popping fucking Cuban cigars and fighting the CIA, he was a doctor. You look at guys like Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi. They were both doctors. No, they were both lawyers by trade. These are all people. You look at the founding fathers; they were all
Karl
scientists,
Marx, even, or
lawyers,
like
doctors.
yeah.
Exactly, all revolution. And I think that's a really cool way that they explore that in Korra. How there's an extension of that history. Like who are the anti-bending revolutionaries? It's Amon, who is part of an aristocratic bending dynasty, crime dynasty, and then there's Hiroshi Sato, a man of science, an engineer.
Yeah.
Then you also see, Unalaq versus Tonrock, right? I think, the brothers. It's sort of an
Mhm.
extension of a familial conflict. There is a lot of really interesting things in Korra that I
Mhm.
think they do, and I think Bright played, puts a lot more attention to history. They very clearly are paying attention to history, which is
Right. Well, even like
something
their
I
own like
admire.
their self history, like even though obviously it has relations to Japan, China, Korea, with the whole Fire
Mm.
Nation and Earth Nation, like they're like, hey, we're building republic cities. Like Korea's like kind of like, well, she does also represent fascism. She kind of represents like the kind of Korean nationalism there, or even like you could make the argument of like Chinese like scars of China that like Japan left to a
Yeah,
degree.
the Earth Kingdom is kind of like a proxy for all of continental Asia.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, uh, and just like the whole like yeah, from a like a historical point of view, Republic City is mostly Earth Kingdom land. And
Yes.
yeah, over the past 100 years,
It's also like, and yeah, to touch on that one of the other things I really like about Korra is like how they touch on that exact idea of it being Earth Kingdom land. One of the big things, and again, because Last Airbender being a retelling of Asiatic history, one of the big things that happened after World War II was that And the beginning of these nationalist movements were like, oh, okay, well, like now we're going to make our own unique national identities. Who gets what? Al Jinnah, Gandhi and Nehru's India was like, we're going to try to get as many states as we can to join us. And then there was Al Jinnah's Pakistan, who was like, well, I think all the South Asians who are Muslims want their own country because we don't feel safe under a Hindu majority. So they made a country along the Durand line, and like every fucking line that's named after a colonial governor or general, it's a fucking disaster that cuts
Yeah.
through like a billion ethnic groups. So that's they see that same idea here, that this is rightfully Earth Kingdom territory, but now there are people who've been living here for so long, like, is it theirs still? It invites these sort of questions, like who's owed what territory, how do we make these sort of agreements?
Mhm.
In the comics, King Kui, showed compassion to the people who lived in this territory and decided to relinquish it so that way they could live in peace and harmony. Basically, there were a bunch of like colonial settlements that had very similar origins, that they were initially firebender colonials that mingled and you know integrated and incorporated Earth nation citizenry, and they became a new identity altogether.
Mhm. Mhm. It was also like something that kind of gets dropped or kind of becomes a bit more simplified. But it was the whole relationship between Tarlock and his brother Notok,
Yeah,
of like how Tarlock's almost like
yeah. I just
more of a villain, like a
yeah.
more like significantly more evil than Amon as well, because it's almost like it would be like just how the brothers clash without even knowing, well, without even Tarlock knowing that it's his brother, but also like kind of the authoritarianism under like the idea of peace he's putting under, of like, nope, I'm putting this like the rule for I'm putting like a limit on like how late non-benders can stay out and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And like turning off their power at night and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see how the series handles things like yeah, it's weird how the series handles things like that, like, well, how are they going to exercise their power?
Mhm, mhm. And like how like they both took a lesson from their father, but they took in the opposite way of like Amon using like Amon went to his way of like revel the way to kind of get rid of the avatar and stuff was like through revolution and control the city through mongering control and fear. What this is about real life revolutions, maybe don't super read into it, but Tarlock almost said like, okay, there's that, and I have this power that can
I
just like
think it's yeah,
strip.
because I think these are two very, and what I like about that is that there's two very legitimate routes to revolution. Not
Uh-huh.
every revolution needs to happen. Give me one.
Yeah, I mean Tarlock was elected. Like he was that's something that I think a lot of people overlook, is that he didn't like kill anyone to get into power. It's just like Tarlock is like a legal he's legal evil at the end of the day. Of like, yeah, no, he legally he played by the rules of Republic City and he got to the his position of power.
Yeah,
And
but like, yeah, what I'm saying is that they're both very legitimate, routes to acquire, like, making lasting change. Like,
right.
there is more lasting change in terms of like, yes, if you want to like change systems, you can do the battle. You can do battle with swords and shields, but the pen and paper is also a very valid form of governance. It's a very valid form of change. Policy, governance. This is policy. Policy making, proper governance. This is what makes and breaks nations, not necessarily institutions make and break nations,
Mhm.
not just like, you know, a series of revolutions. It's institutions that safeguard people from corruption, population honest, that dole out justice, that properly monopolize and distribute violence. It's institutions that protect people, and I think it's really cool that Korra explores the idea of the importance of institutions Of course, they explore it like how people can also subvert those institutions, which I actually thought that was really cool. The way that like they showed both those ideas. How what's his name? The corrupt court in season 2.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How they basically just bribe a judge.
Yeah, they bribed a judge. But even like institutions that live in um, are under threat. There are nuances here. They're not rock solid, and they're just as capable of being subverted. So you have to keep your eyes open.
Uh-huh.
Which I think is also hilarious that he bribed the wrong guy.
Yeah.
It's like, don't worry, I took care of it. It's like, what do you mean?
Yeah, yeah. Or even like monarchies are of course outdated all this stuff, but like just how like bad they're willing to show that the first like the outer ring of Bossing Say is like just covered in like just rotting food and stuff like that. And yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, yeah. Uh, of like core, like there's a lot to be said about like how core the show as a whole kind of tackles different like political philosophies, and of course there's always room to like criticize and stuff like that. But it's also like when it comes to like a lot of its villains, especially like uh Zahir, like I'd say for the most part, like kind of up until the end, they do kind of present like a pretty strong like fallacy case until like they kind of have to get into the nitty gritty of like I'm not sure if it's like what the creators think the politics are or if it's like what the creators think that the characters' politics are
Yeah,
at that moment.
Zahir is really cool. Zahir is
Yeah.
a really fun dark mirror of Aang. It's
Oh yeah.
The idea is like this is a guy who's taking
Airbending
airbending
culture.
philosophy to its like literal extreme. Like we had that entire sequence of like how the idea of the nations are an illusion, right? And that we are all one people. But like Zahir's like, yeah, let's just get rid of nations. Let's get rid of the concept of nations.
Uh-huh.
Of course, the problem is that that's short-sighted because like people like security. People like being safe. The reason nations exist is because people realize that when you pool together your resources, you have a better chance standing against threats who can outside threats who can hurt you.
Yeah. I wonder if they made Zahir entire like had him shave both his head and his face was because like to almost make him resemble Aang to a
I
degree.
think that was very much intentional. Like it's really interesting because Zahir, obviously we look at the colors of the Airbenders, it's these autumn saffrony colors, but then you look at Zahir, it's just all gray and
Right.
muted,
Yeah.
which again is just a which is a duality. I
Mhm.
love the idea of Zahir taking the idea of detaching of like taking airbender philosophy of freedom to its logical extreme: anarchy, no governments, no institutions, every man for himself.
Yeah.
People should only this is like return the world to its natural order.
Him and his like also just the entire crew he has of just like a I feel like well I would say like Ahmad might be like the mascot for the series villains. I would say Zahir and his team is like way cooler than the coolest in general.
They should have started with these guys.
Yeah.
The Red Lotus are fun. The idea of like like it would be fun for like a sort of detective cat and mouse thing if the series
Mhm.
started this way. Like, oh my gosh, the terrorist cell is over here. Oh, they're working with this guy who's over here. It's fun to like sort of see that kind of idea in place.
Yeah, yeah. There's more of an element of surprise than uh, oh, because you know who you're gonna get for the most part when it comes to Avatar villains. Of like, it's mostly gonna be Fire Nation people and the occasional Earthbender. But
Yeah, it's really fun to see like the idea of Team Avatar reflected, right?
yeah,
Instead of like oh, it's a merry gang of heroes. It's like no, they're actually now from our perspective, that merry gang of heroes becomes a destructive terrorist cell that's dedicated to upending world order.
Yeah, it also like from a point resembles like Team Avatar Twist Away. Like they even have like the whole kind of almost like disabled like Bender kind, like physically impaired Bender who like uses their disability to bend more with Min Ling, who has
Mhm.
like some of the coolest fight scenes in the show.
Yeah, Minghua. Yeah, they're just like really fun. They're very inventive. I do like the group themselves. I would love to see more of the combustion bending stuff, but you know, maybe that's for a rainy day.
Yeah.
I'm curious what the origins of that is.
I'm trying to think if we do get the origins of it.
I don't think the wiki ever touches that.
Uh, yeah, but yeah, it's nice to see more of like the more sub skills of bending kind of be a bit more mixed, and like it's not just something that the heroes have. It does make there is more of a sense of danger with a lot of the villains than there is with most of the Avatar villains, say for like Azula at times, because it's like at season 3 is probably the most effective ending in all of Avatar. Like
Mhm.
if
Yeah,
it just ended right there, that will I know it would never do it, but like that would have been the most like bittersweet, like impactful ending of a fantasy series I could think of in a long time.
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely true.
Yeah, yeah. I would do also wonder if like the they wanted to play with the whole almost like different pro bending kind of view with like how their team works. It's like one from each nation, sort of. Well, yeah, it's like
Yeah,
yes,
are airbenders banned, or are they gonna have to wait?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm confident Zahir would probably be from like a earth bending kingdom if he was from anywhere.
I'm very so I yeah. As far as the whole revival thing, is concerned, like the resurgence of airbenders. I always thought the idea was that like it was the idea of atavism, like there are
Mhm.
long lost traits that reemerge. I was thinking like when harmonic convergence happened, it like activated like latent genes among
Yeah.
Earth Nation people that like may have like interacted with airbenders.
I like that it doesn't go out of its way to overly explain it. Like, hey, there's
Yeah,
just
that's more of a theory than anything.
granted, yeah, at the same time, even like when you think about it, it's like the idea that like the Fire Nation got every airbender. Like I get that they're like in like 2 places, but that's kind of like in 3 places, but it does seem like a bit of a stretch, especially with how some of them are meant to be nomadic.
Hmm.
Uh yeah.
I did not like Janora's bullshit spirit projection. I hated that.
Oh yeah, the super weird subset they give airbenders, well, just Janora for the most part, of like her being able to
Yeah,
astral project.
a lot of people don't like flight, but I like it. I think flight is the idea of the idea of that of that was like complete detachment.
Mhm.
You've reached like sort of nirvana amongst this culture, right? So you've reached the highest level possible. I think this is a really cool idea.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, but Janora actually has like a lot more to do in season 2 than like I remember. And it's like she's a pretty good part of it, of that season. Granted, the whole kaiju fight and like how her spirit avatar thing.
Yeah, I agree. Like season two is not as like season two isn't like terrible, and people aren't like yelling in your ear how garbage it is all the time.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
season two is not bad, but the issue
I
is that
think the first
this
half
is
is
where
really
like
strong, but it's
a
like
lot of
yeah,
people.
yeah, it does have a bunch of weird moments and stuff like that. I think the kind of big issue is that it makes Korra really mean, like almost like too mean for Korra.
The big thing though, like the big decision. I think most people would be okay with it if it wasn't for the weird kaiju shit. And
Yeah.
because the main theme of core season four, this was what changed my opinion in season two. The main theme of season two is the idea of losing control.
Hmm.
Every time they think they have something under control, it just gets worse. every single time it gets worse and worse and worse until the last possible moment, where Korra loses the Avatar state. I think thematically, I kind of I kind of fuck with it. I think it's really cool. But the
I
big thing that really hurts it, more than anything, the big thing that hurts, of course, we have to talk the elephant in the room, the destruction of the Avatar state, or
yeah,
the severing of the, past lives. The main reason, I think a lot of people hate this is because, like, okay, so there's a big difference between like Western philosophies and Eastern philosophies. Western philosophies and Western culture largely prizes things like individualism. So it's like a lot of like, oh man, I can do anything, last minute superheroic stuff. Whereas
yeah,
Eastern religions have always looked more to the world. It's more of an observation of what the world is, what the world is like, how the world interacts and fluctuates, and how to deal with it. Take, for instance, some, like, one of the big things the series borrows a lot from is Hinduism. So you have things like the idea of karma, which is, you put good actions in, you get good actions out, you get good results. You put bad stuff in, you get bad stuff out. This is sort of like a universal rule of reality, which is like causality. You do good things, beget good actions. Like what you put in begets what you put out.
hmm
Eastern religions were always sort of focused on the idea of looking at how the world works. And again, that's, the big thesis statement of the series is that great gurupathic sequence, where he just sort of explains all these things to Aang. Things like the divisions of the races and people are an illusion, that the world is based off a push and pull of energy and causality, and you can't expect to do everything on your own, that you cannot change the circumstances of your origins, and you have to come to accept things as they are, and that you have a duty and obligation to the world around you. So one of the ways the series was able to explore this really effectively was through the use of perspective. The main appeal of Avatar is that Aang can draw upon his past lives.
right,
He can
yeah,
draw upon them and ask them for knowledge and help, and they can advise. They don't give him the answer, but they can advise him. They can give him perspective. They can provide a much more wider worldview for him to consider. And when Bright killed the Avatar, they took that away. So Korra ends up becoming, again, the Avatar stops being this like bank of knowledge you can use to, make you pause, make you consider, make you think about what you're doing, and instead turn into, ironically, a booster rocket that you can use to win all solve all your problems with.
Did you ever read the comic like after this of like,
Yes.
yeah, where Korra has like she super killed the Avatar state and is like riding towards her next life? Like, here's all your notes.
Oh, really? I don't remember that one.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was one after it, like I think fairly recently, all things considered. Of
The only I don't know if there's a new Korra comic. The last comic that came out was Azul in the Fire Temple, which was pretty
oh no, no,
disappointing to
not
me.
that. Yeah, it was a Korra comic where Korra was talking about she had to like it's confirmed that she's like all her last lives are like permanently gone. She's like writing like in a notebook of like all the knowledge she had of them like for the next Avatar. Uh,
Ah, interesting.
yeah,
No, yeah, that's interesting.
yeah. I do wonder, yeah, if like kind of the Dark Avatar whole thing would work better if it was like less of like Vatu and more like he just absorbed a bunch of like already corrupt spirits and just comes out as like this giant malformed monster.
There was a really great idea they actually had in the Kyoshi book.
Mhm.
There was this character Yoon who gets like betrayed and shoved into
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah, and he eats like an eyeball that's named like Father Glowworm, and he gets
Mhm.
like some sort of a pseudo spirit. Like it basically is an upgrading to he upgrades his normal earthbending abilities and gives it sort of a spiritual element, like a sort of a spirit world ability. So he gains the ability to sort of literally earthbend his way between the regular and spirit world. Stuff like that I think is really interesting. I
What
think they
was
could have done something similar to Vatu. Like maybe he consumes a spirit who maybe he allies himself with a spirit that allows himself to be consumed. I think the only real fix you have to do to Unavatu is, I don't think a human spirit hybrid is necessarily bad. I think the idea of a human making an alliance, like a Faustian deal, like
Mhm.
Dr. Faustus, or like a deal, like a Mephistopheles, right? Making
Yeah.
a deal with this like spirit to do this thing. I think the idea of like Unalaq wanting the spirits to return so that way they can like we can feel the world be more connected, be can like feel more whole,
Mhm.
with our spiritual core. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think if you didn't make him this weird, like, yeah, and I want to be God, it's like, well, if you just made him like more egalitarian and that he was doing this for what he believed was the right cause, to see this world restored and to see the spirits return to the world that they, not just ostracized in the spirit world, but also
Mhm.
be allowed to exist in the normal world, I think that would have been
Yeah.
fine.
It was kind of weird because like they do in season 2 in the flashback, they show like a spirit just go through that guy who's like friends with Juan, and he becomes malformed and kind of like monstrous, but
Yeah.
like it doesn't like change his personality. It's just like it messes up physically, and then his like as a result, his mind gets messed up just because he gets like so like he hates that just so much. It's like it feels like you could have probably just done that instead of just the whole straight up absorbing this version of Satan.
Nothing in that season's, I think, really broken. I mean, the only thing you have to do, like I said, is just kind of clean some stuff up.
Right.
Like I
I
said, with
think, yeah,
him.
yeah. Honestly, I would have made Varric the main villain of that season. 'Cause for
Really,
how
very.
he's structured and how it goes throughout it, and like his goal of basically selling weapons to both the tribes, but as well as like Republic City, as well as like kind of commodifying stuff like uh
Yeah,
uh
very good. I don't know.
Marshine.
Very good degrading.
Yeah, Varric is very weird.
Varric is definitely one of the more, like, I guess, annoying characters. I
Yeah,
don't like that. I don't really like Varric too much. I think this, I don't know, because like a lot of scientists are usually locked into single disciplines.
yeah. Oh,
Varric kind of dips his feet in basically every known thing from engineering
totally.
to like the reason why a lot of scientists are able to make discoveries is because they spend a lifetime researching their discipline. But Varric literally like just invents shit on the fly. He's like, I invented flying, and I invented this thing, and I invented a mech suit, and then I invented this other thing. I invented the concept of moving pictures. It's like, fuck off.
Yeah, it is kind of wild how how Elon Musk has just ruined people's perception of like the billionaire, capitalist, inventor, genius man
Yeah,
who in like the past
the
5 years,
billionaire genius,
of like
Mister.
yeah,
The car that kills people or something.
oh yeah. Yo, you know what? Like Varric's like whole if Varric said like, "Oh, I have an idea for a mech," it's not his idea. It's that he told his like workers to make it, and then once they made
Yeah,
like
I think that would be better. I don't know, man. Just very just kind of annoys me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, one thing I wanted to talk about, kind of like the voice acting of the cast for this, for the most part, because like I really like this uh cast, especially J.K. Simmons as Tenzin, because it's a role you don't really get for him, of just like kind of how like
Yeah, J.K. Simmons, like every J.K. Simmons cartoon character, like has like a very distinct like phenotype.
but it's
This
like,
like they kind of like look like him, very like long, slender, like
oh yeah,
yes, I'm, like
kind of
I
have
have
that
this.
like intensity, but like I
Yeah,
like how like soft spoken he is as Tenzin, just how gentle and understanding he is. It was funny, people like saying like he's a bit intense as Tenzin, but then like Omni Man came out.
yeah. He's so many characters. He's like Stanford Pines. He's the
Mhm.
lion. Uh, he plays a lot of characters.
Mhm.
Good for him.
The
It seems
yellow
like I always appreciated though that like he just seems to be like I don't know. A lot of people don't like. Oh, apparently he's the yellow M&M too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But a lot of people just don't like. I don't know. A lot of people like look down on animation as a discipline. And there's arguments to be made how animation is very like childish,
Mhm.
because that's the only thing that's profitable. So, but I mean, I always thought J.K. Simmons was really cool because he seems like he doesn't he seems to like have some like respect for the medium,
Mhm.
and also Jeanette Varney does amazing as Korra. I
Oh
think.
yeah, yeah, I really liked her voice. Uh, uh, I it was wild hearing Dante Bosco again as Iroh, but like that character kind of does not need to be in this series.
Mm,
It's just because like he doesn't really have much to do.
yeah. There's also there was also D. Bradley Baker. That D. Bradley Baker was, let's see, he's Naga and Pabu. What,
Mhm.
really? But he's also a Tarlock, which is like, yeah, with him, it's always annoying because it's like you can't unhear like D. Bradley. Like once you realize a role is D. Bradley Baker, you can't unhear it
Yeah,
because you can notice little inflections in his voice.
like as like it's like you just hear him. It's like, oh, that's Klaus from.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I want to talk kind of before we end this is about the last season and specifically uh Korosami. Like the kind of the criticisms, but also the praise it's gotten. What do
I
you think
just
of Korosami as a?
I to be completely honest with you, I don't really have a lot of strong opinions on it.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know. I thought like Mako and Korra was pretty cute. I thought they had a cute relationship, but then also like it's pretty obvious they like sabotaged it
Oh
for
yeah,
room for, yeah, for so that way they can make room for Korosame.
yeah, for the fans.
I don't I hate to like, oh my god, we were planning Korosame from the beginning. Shut up. No, you weren't. No, you fucking weren't.
I think
Like,
what I'm
no,
not
but
like
you have to see. You have to look between the lines. There are no fucking lines to look between. The whole point of Asami was that she was the romantic sexual rival of Korra. Uh, what possibility was the secret romantic friction? Like, come on, like be serious.
yeah. Something
I
doesn't
mean,
have.
a lot of people like it. A lot of people connect with it, and if that's what makes you happy,
Well, yeah, for the
there's no
times.
shame in it. I'm never
Yeah.
gonna like. I'm not the kind of guy who likes policing what people like to consume because I think that's lame as hell.
Mhm.
But also, like, dude, come on,
I
like,
do think at the same time, I do think kind of course not the Avatar's take on romance isn't has never been really that strong, like in
yeah,
any of their series. And usually the characters that have like chemistry like never end up together, like at least permanently, especially like uh because I always thought like it's like in the last season Korra and Sami like have like two scenes together. I get that's how
yeah,
it's structured, but it's like why like when Ain's kids go to find Korra, it's like why didn't Asami come with them? Or
yeah, yeah. It's like, oh my god, I missed you so much.
yeah,
Oh, thank you. Pushes
it
her hair behind her head and then like blushes. It's like, be quiet.
yeah, but
It's not bad or anything, and I just it does come out of like I remember when I saw that scene, I was like, because I remember being when I was young and I saw that scene, when they were gonna do it, I was like, this is it. This is romantic. Why would they do this? There was no like hint. I understand like network censors and stuff, but
of course,
I don't
yeah.
know. It just doesn't. It just feels weird.
It was weird because I rewatched season 4 not too long ago, and it was like it's weird how like it is because she gets to interact with her a lot more, but how much more chemistry Core has with Opal than Asami.
You know what? I'm gonna go further and say I thought Bolin should go with Asami. I thought they had really good
Mm.
chemistry.
Oh yeah, in season 2 where they're kind of like
Yeah, I
actually
think
friends.
Bolin and Asami get along really well.
Yeah.
I think that I think the whole idea of street urchin meets rich girl is very
Mhm.
much a like classical golden age of Hollywood kind of story, and I just think they get along better. Bolin's not like a hothead like Mako, and he seems very like emotionally like mature.
Mhm.
And like I think Asami keeps a good head. She and gives him like clarity. I thought they would have been really good together.
Mhm.
I also don't really like, bi Korra doesn't really bother me. I think Korra and Mako make a cute couple, if only because I just think like there's a fun contrast here. But also like I don't know. I also can see the argument against it.
Mhm.
I will say I like ponytail Korra more than
Yeah,
bob cut Korra
yeah.
because
I do like how Korra gets all the different like looks and outfits for a lot of her series. It's posting.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, there's some good stuff here. But yeah,
mhm.
overall, I mean, I think like I don't have any opinions on it, but if it makes people happy,
Yeah, totally.
there's nothing shameful about it.
Yeah, yeah,
You know?
yeah. Well, that
So
was our talk on a brief talk on Korra series. Thank you for coming, Art. Let people know where they can find you.
I mean, you just find me on Twitter. Just type in at art handle.
All right.
Right now, I'm using a profile pic of James Cage, but I change it every once in a while. Yeah,
Nice.
I'm using a profile pic of it's a James Cage White LoJack. So you
Mhm.
will be able to find me there. But if I'm not using that PFP, it will have probably changed. Who knows? But otherwise, I'd appreciate anyone checking out my stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for coming on. See you later. Bye.
Well, thanks for having me. Take care.
Yep.